Hi guys, welcome back to Crafty Not Shifty. Today I'm going to be sharing another card using the Sail Away stamp set that I got as part of the July 2015 Simon Says Stamp card kit. So I've taken the stamps arranged as I showed you just there, and I have embossed them on some watercolour paper using clear embossing powder, and I'm going to take some tumbled glass, Mermaid Lagoon and Salty Ocean Distress inks, and I'm going to watercolour this scene. And you can't actually see the stamping very well at the moment, but once I get these colours on top you'll be able to see the image as it resists the ink. So I've got my water in these little tablet holders. I find that they're really useful for when you're doing watercolour, particularly with lots of different coloured ink, because you have small sections of the water, so as it gets dirty you can move into a clean piece. So I'm taking a wide brush and I'm generously coating some water across the top of the watercolour paper. I just used my mini mister to activate the distress ink. I'm just going to re-stick down this piece of watercolour paper here. It's kind of peeling away. Whenever I'm doing watercolour I try to use a kind of a wooden background that I'll tape my watercolour cardstock to, and then I'll paint on top of that. I just find it's a little bit easier to have it onto this flat surface that I can tilt and move around as I'm painting. So as you can see, I'm just dabbing on the tumbled glass distress ink. There's no kind of rhyme or reason to the pattern, it's just making sure that I keep the edges of the card a little bit lighter, and I want the darkest colours to sit mostly in the bottom section of this card. One of the great things about the distress inks is that as you're working with them they react really well to the water, they blend really easily, and if you find that parts of the colour are too harsh you can blend it out really easily just by adding some water on the top. So I'm coming in now with some of the new Mermaid Lagoon colour. It's a really nice colour for a ocean type scene. And on top of that I'm adding some Salty Ocean. So these three blues blend really well together to really make this kind of dreamlike watercolour. So in a second I'm just going to bring in my heat tool and dry this first layer of watercolour off. You can just leave it to dry naturally, but I like to just bring in my heat tool to speed up the process a little bit, and then I can add an extra layer of colour on top. Okay, so there you can see I've dried my watercolour, and now I'm just adding in some more of that Mermaid Lagoon onto the cardstock, which is now dry. So you can see the difference, the colour is sitting on top a little bit more, it's not blending out quite as easily, and that's exactly what I want for the second layer. So I'm coming in now with the Salty Ocean colour and just adding some of that on top. Again, I'm just splotching it around the card, making sure that the very edges of the card blend out almost to the original white colour. Now I'm spritzing the top of my card with my mini mister to add some water and to help that ink blend, and then I'm just going to come in with just some clean water on a brush and just really blend those colours together. One of the great things about distress inks is that you don't really have to be very careful when you're using them. They will blend together really beautifully, and it's quite difficult to make mistakes with them. As you can see, I'm not taking much care with the brush. I'm certainly by no means an artist, definitely not any kind of watercolour artist. I'm definitely more of the try it and see variety, so I'll splodge down some of the colour and see how it looks. But as I say, with these distress inks it's really easy to make a beautiful patterned background, and one of the great things about this style of watercoloured background is that you want there to be imperfections within the colours, and you can achieve that by adding water on top, which you'll see me do in a minute. So I'm just trying to even out some of that colour now, and I'm going to make sure that there's ink underneath these sections that were taped down. The card is much drier now than it was before, so I don't necessarily need to be as careful as having it masked down to stop the paper from curling. So I can just peel that up and just blend that colour out just using some water to make sure that all of it is covered. You could also have used a slightly larger piece of watercolour cardstock and then trimmed it down after you've finished painting. But I cut mine down to the size that I would be using, which is 5.5 by 4.25. So now I've got all of that painting done, I'm going to come in with this brush and just splash some water over the top of the card, I'm going to let that sit on the card, and you can see it slowly starts to wick away the ink. It almost works as an eraser, so I've tilted that around to spread out each of those water drops. I let that sit for about 30 seconds, and then I'm coming in with a dry paper towel and just splatting off the extra ink that's wicked away. So I'm going to do that again, the exact same process, just coming in with some more water to get some small droplets on top of the card. I think this really adds to kind of the sky and water effect with the ink, and again this is where the imperfections really start to look like part of the card, so any parts of that ink that you struggle to blend out suddenly look like they're there by design rather than a happy accident. So I'm adding on top some of the Mermaid Lagoon and Salty Ocean ink, just so there's some variance in the ink splotches. We've got some that are lighter, using water to blend out the colour, and some that are a bit darker by coming back in with some ink. Once I've finished with that and it's dry, I'm going to take another piece of paper towel and just rub over each of those embossed sections to make sure none of the ink has stuck to it. As a final touch, I decided to add some much larger splashes of ink by squirting some water into my hand and letting that drip on top of the card. And once again, I let that sit on the card for a couple of seconds and then blotted it off. And that's the watercolouring section finished for this card. So again, you can just rub over any of the embossed areas to make sure that no ink has stuck, and we're ready to put the card together. I took my corner chomper and I curved each of the corners of these pieces of paper on the larger side of the corner chomper. You just press the paper in, press down, and it perfectly rounds out each of the corners for you. So I'm going to do that on the watercolour piece of paper and also on the blue piece of paper that I have to go in the background. I cut down the blue piece of cardstock to 5 3/4 by 4.5 inches, so it's just 1/4 of an inch larger on each side. And again, I came with the corner chomper and rounded those corners. My card base is 9.5 inches by 6 inches, which is scored at 4 3/4, and again I rounded all the corners there. So I'm using my ATG gun to stick down the blue panel. You could also use wet glue, and then I'm coming in with my 1/4 inch score tape to stick down the watercolour panel. The reason I'm not using my ATG gun is because the watercolour panel is slightly thicker and slightly heavier, and it will have curved ever so slightly whilst all of the water was being added for the watercolouring. So I want to use a tape that's really strong to make sure it sticks down nice and flat on the front of the card. So I'm just peeling off the backing for the score tape, and then I'll press that down onto the front of the card and we're almost done. If you don't have score tape, you could of course use your ATG tape and just maybe let a book or something sit on top of the card while it really adheres down nice and flat. And again, you could do the same with your wet glue. So here I've just added some sequins, and I'm using my quick stick tool to pick those up, and I've got some Ranger's matte medium in this fine line bottle here. And this matte medium is great because if the glue kind of squishes out the sides of the sequins, because it's matte, you can't see it on the front of the card. Okay, so there we have it. The card is finished. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you have, be sure to hit thumbs up, to like and hit subscribe so you don't miss another video from me. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye!